Well, it's been a very long wait if you are a Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes fan. Less so if you're a Mercedes fan, given that in the 2022 Hungarian Grand Prix, it was in fact George Russell who's taken pole, but come 2023, Lewis Hamilton is on pole position. No, this is not talking about 2020 or 21 or 2019 or any other season that Hamilton dominated. In 2023, Lewis Hamilton is on pole position for the first time. Not just that, this is the first pole position that Lewis Hamilton has gotten since Saudi Arabia in 2021. That is a 33 race long gap between his 103rd and 104th pole position. That is, of course, the biggest talking point from this particular session of qualifying, aside from the fact that reigning and defending world champion Max Verstappen just didn't look like he was as dominant as he should have been, and he admitted afterwards that it was down to some issues with balance, and we'll get to that in just a bit. First, let's talk about how it is that qualifying panned out and what were the results of the standings. Now, quick refresher, this was of course the start of a new F1 format, or rather F1 qualifying format, wherein tire specifications would be preset. So in Q1, where of course all 20 cars would be participating, everyone was only allowed to use hard tires. If you made it to Q2, the 15 cars that made it to Q2 were allowed to use the medium tires, and only if you make it to Q3, which is the final top 10 shootout, were you allowed to use soft tires. So this is of course in a bid to increase, let's say, or reduce the amount of tire usage that you have, and it led to some interesting results in qualifying. How so? Because if you look at the drivers who are eliminated in Q1, you'll see a certain George Russell at 18th position. Now, it wasn't because of the fact that the Mercedes didn't have pace. I mean, the other one was good enough to be sitting on pole position after all, but it was down to the fact that, well, we'll get to that in just a bit. First off, let's quickly run through the order. Alex Albon in the Williams was number 16, Yuki Tsunoda in AlphaTauri 17, George Russell in Mercedes, as I shockingly said, at 18, Kevin Magnussen and Logan Sargent of Haas and Williams respectively were the two drivers who were in fact, in those other positions, now 19th and 20th. Now, all these other four drivers, if you look at Albon, Tsunoda, Magnussen and Sargent, you'd expect them to be in and thereabouts of their positions. They weren't looking that good. How was George Russell at number 18? Well, it's down to a very simple thing really. In the run-up to the last minute of qualifying in that particular session, they were, of course, all the cars slowing down. George ended up getting caught in traffic and actually passed by a couple of cars. The hard tires were not warming up as expected. And therefore, the man who started last year's race in pole position, well, he's only P18. And this is, mind you, on a track that is never ever been easy to overtake on. So it's going to be a slog of a race for George Russell. If he can even get a points finish, I think he'll be a very happy chappy. As for the others, well, see, the Williams were always expected to struggle at Hungary. It's a more higher downforce circuit and their car is just not very good at generating downforce. Yuki Tsunoda and AlphaTauri, well, they've been pretty used to not making it out of Q1. Although Daniel Ricciardo actually broke that streak, he ended up making it in Q2. And Kevin Magnussen in the Haas just didn't seem to have the kind of qualifying pace his teammate Nico Hülkenberg did. We'll get to him in just a bit. Then it came to Q2 and there were another couple of big scalps in Q2, because if you look at the order, in number 11 is Carlos Sainz. He missed out on a Q3 finish by about maybe just a few seconds here or there, so it wasn't that much. Esteban Ocon was at 12. Daniel Ricciardo, his first qualifying session in quite a while, finished a respectable P13, and it's doubly respectable when you consider the fact that AlphaTauri they've had probably one of the slowest cars on the grid. Lance Stroll in Aston Martin, bit of a disappointing session for him, only P14, and Pierre Gasly rounds off the top 15 drivers in that Alpine. He could have finished a little higher, by the way, but he ended up having one lap time deleted for a track limits violation. No, it wasn't Austria levels bad, but there were a few of those which did crop up every now and again. But overall, the biggest scalp here probably Carlos Sainz. Again, he missed out on Q3 by maybe 0.003 seconds, so it wasn't much of a gap. But not ideal when you're looking at the kind of pace that Ferrari expected to be having in this particular track, that they only had one car fighting in Q3. But Q3 was crazy. You had Charles Leclerc finish at 6th in this particular qualifying session. He was looking good, but towards the end didn't quite seem to have the pace that the others did. Valtteri Bottas in that Alfa Romeo, man, he was absolutely mega. In fact, he was leading Q1 at one point in time. He had the fastest lap on the hards. Fernando Alonso in the other Aston Martin is 8th. Sergio Perez, by the way, first Q3 session for him in 5 races. Ends up finishing a respectable P9, although again, I think they would expect him to finish higher, but nevertheless, small gains, but gains nevertheless. And Nico Hülkenberg is at number 10. Now, if you're looking at these, again, you'd be wondering, wait, what is it that Alfa Romeo have done? Well, bit of a spoiler, Zhou Guanyu finished even higher. And what the Alphas have done is both of them have taken new power units for this particular weekend. So clearly there's a bit of zip in that car. They haven't really bought much in terms of upgrades, but the new power units certainly have helped them, and they're a pretty stable car, one that would be well suited at least for good single pace lap for Hungary. The top 5 though, and this is where things really get interesting. As I said, Zhou Guanyu in that Alfa Romeo 5th, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris round off the second row in 3rd and 4th. And it continues to show that let's say the progress that McLaren have made, it's no fluke, it's very much the real deal. They have done really well. Max Verstappen was on pole. He had done well enough to be on pole despite the fact that in his second run, so what happens in Q3 is because you have the least amount of time, you'll have 2 runs. So he ended up getting a good first run. The second run, he didn't improve his timing, and that left him vulnerable to Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes coming in to steal that lap, especially when you consider that Hamilton was in fact the last driver to finish his lap. So he had improved his timing enough in the second grid, in the second sector rather, and he did in fact end up getting pole by just 0.003 seconds. So that is the qualifying update for you guys. It was a pretty intense qualifying session, really fun, and in fact made even more unpredictable by the fact that you had these tire specifications for every session. That's why you actually saw quite a few of the usually faster drivers struggle at that, but it did make for a good spectacle regardless. What were your thoughts on the qualifying session? You can let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon, leave us a comment, follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. Don't forget to download the SportsTech app, and if you're already on the channel, go ahead and check out some other videos that we put out. For now though, from my side, it's goodbye.